Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Butters. Today we're gonna check out the campfire chat from yesterday. Um, I'm really hoping barbarians get some love because I
Happy
just
Friday,
created
everyone.
one.
Welcome to another Diablo IV Campfire Chat. My name is Adam Fletcher. I am the Associate Director of Community here on Diablo. Joined here by
Yeah, I like
Joe
Adam's
Shelley, Game
shirt,
Director
bro.
for Diablo IV, Mr. Joe Pipora, which you guys
Adam
know.
Fletcher shirt, bro.
And Joe
It's
as
kinda
well,
cool.
I guess. So, I mean, familiar faces.
Sure.
Associate Director for Diablo IV, and of course, Adam Jackson.
Oh, we got the
Brand new
lead
face
class
here.
designer,
He is our
huh?
lead class designer for Diablo IV.
All right.
We have a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
In fact, just note, there's two Adams, two Joes, so this is going to get really confusing here. And we were thinking about, like, maybe we do like a battle royale or something like that to, you know, determine who talks next or whatever. But I will say we actually do have a lot to talk about. In fact, I would almost say this is like dev update stream worthy,
So
as
at least
opposed
Campfire
to
Plus.
Campfire Plus.
Yeah,
easily.
Plus plus.
Yeah.
It's like new game plus plus or whatever.
Okay.
But we do have a lot to talk about, specifically around patch 1.1.1. Did I say enough ones?
Yeah.
You did.
111? 111. Patch 111.
We did.
We are going to talk about some balance changes that are going to be coming to that patch. A ton.
So for this patch, we've got a lot going on. One of our goals is kind of, I think, obvious to the community. We want to kind of improve the effectiveness and the fun of the Sorcerer and the Barbarian. So we've got a lot of changes coming
Let's
in there.
go.
And I think I want to frame this in two ways of kind of what we're thinking about the Sorcerer and then what we're thinking about with the Barbarian. Because they both have, you know, kind of different things going on. For the Sorcerer in this patch, we're focusing on reducing something that we call Kiss Curse mechanics, which is kind of, I know, a very designery term. But it's this idea that we give you a really cool power effect, and then we kind of take something away or make it nerfed or nerf some other part of you in some way, usually for balance reasons, to make sure that it's not just, you know, out of control in power.
Yeah, usually the idea there is, like, to your point, it's like, so we really have, like, you know, 20% we can afford to give you, but if we take 10% of something else away, we can give you 30% or
Yeah.
45% and feel a little bit better about that.
Exactly. Usually it's to sell a fantasy in a really strong way, but we can't, like, do that justifiably without just breaking the mechanic. But we found out in a lot of ways we've been a little too harsh with that, and so we're going to try and reduce or remove that in some cases. And then the other
Okay,
one is
they're
late
gonna
game
take some of that
survivability.
away.
We know
Okay.
the sorcerers typically have a tough time, you know, when they start pushing those later
I was
Nightmare
confused.
Dungeon tiers. And so we're going to be looking at ways to increase that specifically. And an example.
I thought they were saying that they were gonna like try to feed you a buff while they were taking something away, but they said they're gonna try to reduce that. Okay. All right, that's cool.
Well, that Kiss Curse mechanic is the Serpentine aspect. If you know that one, it's the one where you can spawn an additional Hydra, but it reduces the duration of your Hydras. That's just no longer going to reduce the duration. It's actually going to increase it. So that's an example of something. We'll go into more
Okay.
detail later.
Okay.
For the Barbarian, we're focusing on improving the early game and making it feel better and just more fluid. We're going to be improving the Fury generation that you get from your basic skills. And then we're also looking at the late game for the Barbarian by making a lot of their uniques more attractive and effective. So you're going to see later when we go through the notes that you know, we're going to be changing around usually about one affix per unique from something that really isn't that attractive for players to something that they really, really want, which we think will help make those items really exciting.
This sounds like a really
Now,
good idea because
when we make changes to items,
from what I
specifically
hear,
items like
Barbarian has zero
Um,
good like uniques.
many of these
unless
changes
you want Razor Heart for
only take
Thorns.
effect on new items, right? Like I think we have an example
Which is a
of,
problem.
of the Hellhammer here.
Yeah, kind of. It's a little bit more complex than that. So we're going to delve into one of our examples of what we're updating here. But when we update a unique item, we actually update Hellhammer in two different ways. So we're increasing the duration that the ground is going to be ignited and burning, and then we're also increasing the damage. And that's the actual unique effect power, you know, the exciting thing that the item does. But you can see here on
Okay.
Hellhammer, we're also doing another change where we're actually granting you a bonus critical strike damage and removing the bonus damage to crowd control enemies, right? So on the left, what you see here, when you log into the game, you know, after this patch, the left version is what you're going to get. So you're not going to get the critical strike damage change where the actual item affix there, the rule changed, but you are going to get the updates to the upheaval, lasting longer and doing more damage. On the right, when you find your new items after the patch, you're going to get the new affixes, the new rules and things on the item.
So new versions of these items will have all of the buffs we're talking
New
about.
versions will have everything new, And the old versions will get the new
I love
stuff
how in
on
the corner it
actual
says
legendary
in
effects,
development
but then you'll
content,
you
not
won't have the new
final.
item stats on it.
Got
Which
it.
means
Thank
they
you.
could technically change
Yeah,
that
so
and then
going
be
back
like,
to
yo,
kind of other things that we're looking at. So that's the sorcerer and the barbarian
kinda
we're
told
focusing
you.
on. Then generally across all classes, we're doing a few other things as well. We're looking at builds that aren't really hitting a high enough power level, and we're going to be just buffing them and increasing the power of them, so they should feel better and be more competitive. We're also going to be looking at increasing the attractiveness of kind of uniques across the board. We're focusing on sorcerer and barbarian for this patch, but we actually believe that we can do this kind of thing across the board. There's a lot of uniques that we think aren't really hitting the mark. It's something that's kind of a tough thing that we
well,
talk
it's a
about
good
on the
thing
team.
because those are your
Because,
two worst classes
the
right
roles
now.
and the things
So
that the uniques have as far as their item power are all fixed, right? They can't re-roll different stats all over the place. So we could very easily just make all uniques really good by putting all the best stats on the items, right? That's an easy thing to do for us. But we kind of have a push and pull there where we don't want to just make all of them clearly the best items in the game because they have all the best stats and they have really good powers. We want there to be something that's really unique and attractive about them, and you have to kind of think of how you're going to fit these into your character's build. But we think that we are just not hitting the mark on a lot of them, so we're boosting them a little bit and then just kind of seeing how that goes.
so why
Next, we're
can't
going to
we
be
have
looking at opening up build-specific
chaseable
designs
gear?
to be more widely useful. So there's a lot of effects on legendary powers and in
Oh,
other
I'm sorry,
places
Uber
where,
unique. That's right.
this
That's our
effect only
chaseable
works in a
gear.
very narrow use case, like only on a single skill
That most
or a
people
single
won't
group of
even see.
skills, or we're using a certain proc to
Wonderful.
get it. And in many cases, we're just going to open that up to be more widely usable, so that players can actually use them in more different builds or different ways. One example of this that we'll go over later is Chain Lightning's upgrade, Greater Chain Lightning. Currently, it gives you the bounces of Chain Lightning do bonus damage when it bounces off of you. And we're going to change that so that it just does bonus damage when it bounces off of anything. So instead of being kind of a narrow use case where you're only using it like on a boss or a single target enemy and getting value, you'll just get it a lot more often now.
Yeah, it feels like a much better lightning range skill now in that way. I can it's easy for me to clear packs.
This
It's
could
good like that.
actually make Sorcerer
Totally.
really
So
fun.
that's kind of what
Like,
we're looking at for this patch.
I played Sorcerer as my
so
first class
we
for
talked
Diablo
last,
4.
last week about sort of
And-
our things that we want to do.
I mean, I had a lot
like,
of fun
going
with it.
forward in the game. Other things
And I
we
would
wanna
like
do.
to make
Not
another
all of
one.
that stuff is in this patch.
Yeah,
right?
no, we
But,
have
like,
a lot of
I
talks
got
on
to
our team. We have a
level,
lot
like,
of things that we're
60,
thinking about and going on. I thought it'd be really good
64,
also to kind of talk a little bit about how we
and
feel
it
about
just
more
started
longer
feeling
term
super
goals
weak.
and
I was
things about
dying
the
to
game.
everything, wasn't
So
doing much damage.
these aren't coming in this patch, but things that we're thinking
So
about
hopefully
that'll come
this
in the
will,
future that
like,
the team's kind of focused
help
on.
out.
The first one is kind of finding ways to bring different types of damage closer together. As I'm sure many of you in the community know, vulnerable and crit are really, really strong right now. Kind of a lot of the meta is about, you
Talk
make an
about
enemy vulnerable and then you
resistances.
do bonus damage to them, and then you stack as much crit strike chance and crit damage as you can, and then you blow them up, right? Our game actually was foundationally made with other types of builds that aren't only those in mind, right? We have like damage over time or dot damage, things like Firewall or Shadow Necro does a lot of this. We also have Overpower as a mechanic in our game, and these other different ways to build your character. We want them to have parity with vulnerable and crit damage. So we're going to be trying to find where to open up just excitement in different builds in the game. And what I mean by this is we have a lot of legendary powers and effects that like spawn a new thing. An example of this is like on the Barbarian. There's some legendary powers that spawn earthquakes or dust devils. Another one is the Necromancer has like things that leave shadow trails on the ground that deal damage. And these things, they deal what we call flat damage, which is like we give it a damage number, and then that's how much it does. And ultimates are kind of in this range as well. A lot of ultimates that we see that are just used because they buff the player in some way.
We've been talking here a little bit about sort of our philosophy here. We're about to get into patch notes. We're about to talk about Sorcerer. But we thought that it was important to talk a little bit about this philosophy, both because we want to be very transparent in terms of like how we're thinking about the game and what kinds of why we're making
Can we
changes.
fix resistances, please?
Both
Please.
So that when you see changes,
I don't
you
think
can
I'm asking
understand
too
what
much.
what we're thinking, like what we're going
I just
for.
want something to
And
work in the
also
game.
So that,
It's
we
obviously
can,
meant to work. There's stat
incorporate
built around
feedback
on
from
your
the
armor.
community, feedback from you into these kinds of changes.
Yeah, and that goes down even to the format for this particular live stream, right?
Yeah.
So like we're gonna go through a lot of details really, really soon, which I think people are really excited about. I hope people are really excited about because we're gonna have a lot of those. And then afterwards, we want to hear back from the community about like how how this worked. Like, was this the best way to get this information? Did you get a lot of good data from us, and do you understand why we're doing making the changes that we are, right? And to Joe's point, again, it is really
in those patch notes, and now so that everyone will end up seeing it. We'll talk off. with the sorcerers. So we have a lot of different slides and changes here that we do want to detail. So Adam, I know, wants to go through them all.
Yeah, totally. So I think what I'll do is just give you a few moments to look at the screen and kind of see what we're doing, and then talk high level about some of the bigger changes here. So Flickering Firebolt is one we're changing Firebolt to basically just generate mana when you hit an enemy. Before it was only generated when you hit a burning enemy. So when you would just try and cast Firebolt, without doing anything else, you would just always miss the first
I
hit
still
of getting
think Arc
mana.
Lash
Yeah,
is
that
better,
always
but
felt bad,
okay.
yeah.
This is negative feedback loop, so we're just going to make it feel nicer. You still feel nice about burning things and piercing, but you just get it more often. Probably another big one here is the greater chain lightning change I talked about, where every time that it bounces, the next hit will deal damage rather than only bouncing off of you. And then we're also buffing the other choice for destructive chain lightning, so you get more crackling energies.
Okay.
Next one, let's go to the passives. These are all the key passives at the bottom of the skill tree. Isu's Ferocity is a big one. You're going to see a lot of these kinds of changes where it used to work kind of in a more narrow use case, and now it works in a case that it didn't, so that's just generically good. This one, it used to not really work on bosses very well. You had to kill enemies by critting them to get the bonus. And now, let's see, these are a lot of the defensive changes that we talked about. So you've got some damage reduction increases to a lot of the chew on here.
There's your first one, Serpentine.
Yep, there it is. That's one we talked about before. So now you can have a Hydroactive, and instead of the duration being decreased, it's actually going to be increased. Next, we've got some, again, damage buff numbers to things that are underperforming. Aspect of 3 Curses is one. I don't want to read all this.
I don't want to go
again,
through all this.
A lot more usable.
Have it
and in
all
combination with that Unbroken Tether, I think
pause
Chain
it
Lightning players are going to be eating pretty this patch. And let me see here. Some Snow Veiled Aspect is getting a pretty big generic buff, where before it just gave you Unstoppable when you used Frost Star, where the bounces could do it pretty often in such a way where you'd only hit an enemy once with a bounce. And we have to put this damage penalty on it because, like I said before, we're increasing the Fury generation of all of those basic skills. So you're just going to get more Fury in the early game so that you can, do that basic core skill loop a little more.
Sure. A lot of people are going like Fury gain 11 to 13.
Buff, and one of the enhancements is increasing that vulnerable duration, so it should hopefully be more attractive.
One thing I do want to note is like even on if we go back to the other slide, like
Sure.
a lot of people are going like Fury gain 11 to 13 and like 10 to 13, and they're always like noting like, well, that doesn't feel like a...
Making it usable in a part of the game where it didn't used to be. We've also got Gushing Wounds is one I think worth calling out. You're going to get a benefit when hitting bosses, so now it's useful in a part of the game that it wasn't used in at all. Another one is the aspect of moving just the base thing that Unique does, and then also trying to replace an item stat that wasn't very attractive or not as attractive with one that we know players really, really like to make these meaningful for them. So Fields of Crimson, this is the one where you do blood pools when you run, so you're going to see a lot more for them, but we wanted to give the other classes something exciting as well. Rogues are actually, I think, eating pretty well right now, so they're pretty good, but we still found some things of underused things to buff. Probably one of the more big ones here is Forceful Arrow. We're changing the functionality here so that every time that you cast, third cast of the arrow just pierces all enemies, which is a pretty big, just generic bonus.
All right.
It sets itself up.
It sets itself up, yeah, exactly. Here, let me look if there's anything noteworthy. There's some buffs to things that are underused. Fixed with bonus vulnerable damage. And then the Word of Hakan, we replace ultimate damage with cooldown reduction. Skills. So your wolves are going to feel better. The both passive and active damage is going up. The upgrades for the wolves are all going to be a pretty meaty upgrade there in its damage. This will also, by the way, improve the legendary, I think it's legendary where your wolves can cast rabies. That's also going to be improved by this. So just that whole archetype. We're increasing that from 6 to 7 seconds, so it should be a little...
Anything about minions? Let's see. Bone Spear, blah, 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 blah. With their legendary board, willpower requirement reduced from 50 to 40. Bonus damage 40. Willpower increase from 2.5% to 4%. Legendaries, empowering Reaper, damaging enemies with Sever has a 10 to 20% chance to spawn a blade, blah, 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 blah.
A little more friendly to players in this current state of the game. And we added a new way to scale that damage in the legendary space. We got feedback that this really just wasn't scaling enough to be meaningful, even significantly.
Decay, damage increase from 20 to 40. 20 to 40 to 25 to 45. Aspect of Torrent, Essence Regeneration. That's pretty good. What the fuck? You see how big? What the hell? What the fuck? Hulking aspect, legendary in category. Alright, we're back. We're here. Yeah, that's a big change. Monsters. Minions. The following attacks now deal reduced damage to Druid companions and Necromancer minions. Balrog, Fire Breath, Elite Affixes, Fire Enchanted, Electrified Obelisk, Shock Lance. Malignant Hearts, Caged Heart of Spell Breaking, change to upon taking elemental damage, gain 10 to 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. General unique items, Temerity, all-stat affix replaced with max life. Barrier is now based on maximum life. Now properly accounted by conditions checking for the player having a barrier.
And almost like an encyclopedia of stuff, that especially on the barb and sorcerer classes. But I will say that it's nice that we got some stuff in for the rogue, necromancer, and druid players as well.
I'm glad that they're buffing like
buffed up
at least something for each class.
Actually,
That's
one
actually
more
a good
caveat to
thing.
all of that. I should have said this at the beginning.
Each class is going to feel a
not
little
final
bit
yet.
better.
Not final
This
yet.
is
But
planning
they
progress.
still need to
The
work on
odds are very
resistance.
high. We do 90% of it or most of it, maybe even all. But as we get into the weeds of things and we're updating things, some things may change. So this is our plan. It's very likely. Likely it'll be at least most of it, if not all of it, but it's not completely in the game yet, so.
There might be some number tweaks, basically.
Yeah, we always add a small caveat just because things are still going through testing right now on our side.
Correct.
And we
It's
want to
going
make
through
sure.
testing, all that stuff.
Yeah,
so.
we want to make sure we're not completely.
I'm very careful. I always caveat, not final until you see it in the game.
Adam's being very cautious about
Yes.
it.
I am very
It's
cautious
not
of
going to
that.
be, you're not going to experience something that's totally different from what you just
That's
saw.
right. That's,
No.
why, that's also
It'll
why
be
we're not
most
releasing
of it.
patch notes today, and we're going to actually discuss when patch notes will be released
We will.
later on
Yeah.
the stream. So
Yes.
we'll reveal that.
And one thing I do want to note is like because I'm seeing this like a little bit in chat and people are
Yeah.
going like, hey, you guys are adjusting some tweaks with like, for instance, like druid summons and their minions. Same thing with like there's a lot of questions about like, hey, what's the overall plan on like minion builds and so forth in the future?
I know
Is that
people
something you
want
guys
the
are still gonna
necromancer
wanna
minion
work
build to
on,
work.
look at in the future?
I
This
can
is
talk
not
about
just
this
a,
for
I
a
know
very
as-
long time.
I know a
Yes.
lot of streamers want the fucking
Druid and
minion
Necromancer are a
builds.
little bit different, so I guess I'll talk Necromancer first. So Necromancer minions is absolutely a core fantasy of Necromancer players that minions are cool and awesome, and that you can raise the dead and have the dead fight for you. That is core. Minions, it turns out, in all games, not just ours, or summons or all that, are very complicated and hard to make work. They have a lot of moving parts that are different than every other class and build archetype in many games. They have AI. They have a passive and active component to them typically. There's a lot going on. So in this patch, we're not touching the Necromancer stuff a lot. It is on the team's radar of looking at the ways that they scale, looking at the ways that things proc with them, looking at just the combination of passive versus active activity that we want the player to do there. So there's definitely a lot going on there. We are thinking
Can we
about
get
it.
the fix
there will be
to
stuff coming, but no
resistances?
promises on when, but we are actively talking about it. Druid is a little bit different because from the ground up, the class fantasy is not only minions, right? It's like a specific build and way to play. One of the things that we were concerned about when launching the game is we didn't want the druid to like have just as many or more companions than the necromancer, and they're stronger. It's like, where's the fantasy of the necromancer if the druid does it better, right? So that was something that we contended with a lot. I'm sure that we're going to flex on that over time. We did add support. We still love companions on druid, and we will absolutely be making it more of a thing, hence why the others, right? I think necromancer moves to another class's fantasy or an archetype that doesn't make sense fantasy-wise.
It's maybe a little bit higher than we expected.
Yes.
So this is one of those situations where, like, kind of in response to the fact that players are really hoping, like, druid players are looking to go after this fantasy of, like, I am the master of the animal kingdom, and I'm going to have all these changes going.
Correct. It's the eternal struggle for us on class design.
Sure.
Yeah. We also have a lot of like quality of life items that we wanted to talk about that we actually kind of hit on last week when we were talking on the Campfire Chat that would be coming in 1.1.1. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about those here. I know we have some changes coming for like monster density, for instance.
Yeah, I want to talk about monster density. So we've said a few times now that we're going to increase monster density in Nightmare Dungeons and Helltides. These changes are in 1.1.1, like we said last week. And I think we have an image of an example of a Nightmare Dungeon. This is how it is today.
Yeah.
If you go into Nostravis Deepwood, of course, monsters are going to not be exactly like this, but this is an example of it. And then in 1.1.1, it's going to change, so you can see a lot more monsters here.
There it is.
And this is really going back to, we talked about our mission statement for the live game of after you've achieved your build, being able to go in and mow down large of a nightmare. If you go into Nostravis,
this is it right now. And this is after the patch. It's a pretty sizable difference, yeah. Right, yeah. And then it'll be like, and then you're gonna the thing is gonna say slay all enemies in the fucking woods, right? And you're gonna just like start from like I don't know,
live game.
I don't know which side you start on this dungeon, but like let's say you start down here, right? You move up, you kill everything. You get up to the door and it still says slay all enemies. You check your map. You forgot to come down here and slay these 3 enemies or whatever. So like now you have to still come back down through the fucking map to slay these 3 goddamn enemies to walk all the way back up to the door. That would be a problem. Like I would get mad. But I mean, yeah, that's a lot of enemies. That's a lot of experience. I mean, fuck it.
After you've achieved, I said last week, there are some areas of Helltide that are highly dense, and we want to make sure that all of our players across all of the different platforms that we support can enjoy this increased density. So it's not just the people with the absolute top-end equipment. So we've also been making sure that as we bump up these densities, that we're doing it in a way that performance stays reasonable. So you can actually, like, if we bump up density and then the game turns into a slideshow, we didn't actually make the game more fun, even though there are a lot of monsters. So it needs to stay performant at the same time. So we've been working on that at the same time so that we can really hit that target. And this is something too that, when 1.1 comes, 1.1.
1.1.1.
We gotta have like
Triple one.
We gotta have a different name for these patch notes.
So once we're able to capture more data from players on live, we can see how players with different like PC specs are able to interact with some of these spaces.
And then I know we have some changes coming in regards to bosses and so forth as well.
That's right. So we didn't talk about this last week, but we have gotten a lot of feedback before about the about players, particularly like in World Tiers 3 and 4, fighting like dungeon bosses and world bosses, and being able to go in there with their enhanced power. Now they've got like some uniques online. Their build has really come online, and they've got like, a lot of like damage to vulnerable targets. Like they're mowing through some of these bosses faster than we expect, right? So, or rather, fast enough that's not really challenging and not really engaging. So we are boosting the health of bosses in World Tiers 3 and 4. At brackets as you're kind of going up the experience. But in exchange for this, in exchange for making some of these pieces just a little bit harder as players are going through them, we are also going to be making a change to the rewards that you get going through these.
Yeah.
So now, like after 1.1.1 goes live, dungeon bosses starting at level 35 even. So this is before you can get into world tiers 3, 4, and 3 and 4. And then it's the so once you've done that, or once you've killed those, you're going to have a guaranteed legendary item drop in that space. And that's going to carry up as well into World Tiers 3 and 4. When you complete a Legion event, that's going to also give you a guaranteed legendary drop starting at level 35. There's a chance before 35, but there's guaranteed.
So the bosses are spongier, but we're going to give you more rewards. Okay.
Guaranteed at level 35. You're going to have one pop in. And then another Butcher has a 100% chance to drop a legendary as well. Because he's a boss, of course. And then another really big one is we got, and this is funny, I did it, please don't follow me on Twitter unless you really want to see a lot of nerdy stuff. But I did a Twitter poll a while ago where I basically just said what do you think is the chance at which a treasure goblin will drop a legendary item? And I said it was 10%, 25%, 40%, 50% with the 4 options. The majority of players, voters, I should say, right? All selected 10% was the chance, and everybody had their own, their feelings on it as they were kind of going through it. But the reality is at level, and I said level 50 Treasure Goblin as part of this. But the reality is they have a 50% chance to drop legendary items today, and that's like going back to like level 35. They've got a very, very high chance to drop legendary items, but
So what you're saying is sometimes I kill a Treasure Goblin and it doesn't drop a legendary item.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's what I heard.
That's exactly right. So
That's
basically, if
not
you
fun.
flip a quarter every 25 minutes,
That's not a fun
that's
thing.
basically your chance to get a legendary item when you're fighting treasure goblins in the overworld. And it's very easy to have like tails, 5 times in a row, and then
That's what happens to me every time.
And as humans, we are 7 times more likely to remember a negative thing than a positive thing. So this is nothing wrong with rather there's nothing wrong with the player's perception of treasure goblins not feeling rewarding. You don't see them that frequently relative to other content types, and when you don't get a legendary item from something called a treasure goblin, that can feel bad. So what we decided to do is we've gone back and said, starting right at level 15 for treasure goblins, 15, they have a guaranteed legendary item drop chance when you kill one from that point forward. So now when you see treasure goblins on the map, you start hearing them snortling around in the corners of your screen. You need to go fight that thing. You need to take it out. You need to get a legendary item from it. That happens very, very early. So we think that's going to be like a really fun updates to kind of help get these things across. 50% isn't useful in this case. 100%, absolutely. We want you to feel like you're getting that power.
50%
No more
fun.
coin flip. No more coin flip.
Yeah, actually
And-
probably more than 50%.
We have a very large plush.
Here's
There he
this
is.
giant treasure
There
goblin
he is.
that
Look-
absolutely doesn't fit on camera
Look
at
how
all.
happy he is.
And
that
now
he-
he's off
he
camera
has his
again.
legendary.
Loot now.
Staring at Joe as he about, or you actually, when we were on the stream last
Yeah.
week. Sorry, that coming in.
Yeah,
in 1-1-1.
we just want to confirm that the stuff we said last week, we're going to reduce respec cost by 40%.
Selling it.
Tab 1's 100K, Tab 2's
Yeah.
200K, Tab 3's 300K, Tab 4's going to be 400K.
Yeah.
So you can buy that for your seasonal stash and for your eternal stash.
Yes, exactly. And then one other thing that we did want to talk about, because this was a question that came up last week in regards to like the leaving dungeon options and like options and
When you're casting some, we were out is look, this slows down the core loop of the game.
So now, like the tier 70 difficulty was the old version, rather the old balance we have in when some of these things. The Nightmare Sigils anymore for a bit, and then Backstabber is being removed as well as part of 1.1.1. Now, this is not by any means
talk about specific Nightmare Dungeon affixes
Yeah.
and everything. So it's great that we've been able to jump on a few of the ones that we know. But we do want to specify that we are going to be releasing patch notes, full patch notes next week. It's actually going to be on August 2nd next week on Wednesday. We'll be releasing full patch notes. And then 1.1.1 is going to be coming out on August 12th, which is Tuesday. So players will... Did I get those dates right? Yes. I'm doing this
hope
by
so.
memory. I'm
honestly,
doing it
I
by
have-
memory.
August 12th is a Saturday.
no idea. So.
I've seen so many calendars in the last day.
Tuesday after.
Oh, sorry. It is
phone.
no. I
I
lied.
think it's
It
not
is
the 12th.
August 8th.
Yeah.
See, this is dates. Just
Everything's
flying
a
through
blur
my
right
head.
now.
August 8th.
Sorry, August 2nd is when the patch notes will be coming out. See everything next Wednesday. I know one question that.
We are not looking to make the game feel slower across the board. We're not looking to like slow down the players' like XP gain rate in response to like feedback about some of the other changes that we had made. The goal was Adam to read the names of people that he is getting the questions from the show.
I think we
That
should.
Adam.
Yes.
Okay, he's saying he should. Okay.
I think we should, just because I don't want to go into that whole situation
Oh,
where
fine,
that
fine.
other outlet
Okay.
made up names and we don't do that. So,
Sure.
But Karnaga and Febzilla, they both ask about. People are all like, no.
I knew it. I knew it.
Well,
Honestly, it would make my job so much easier.
I know.
I wish I
Please
could.
finish your
well,
question.
we're going to
Sorry.
read these at least.
Read
But
these, yeah.
the question is about crowd control.
Okay.
Obviously,
Yeah.
it is a huge
CC?
and popular topic amongst the community. What are our thoughts about crowd control? What are we planning on doing about that here in the future?
I bet we all have thoughts on that, actually.
We do, yeah.
Yes.
Let me
You
just
can
say
jump on that,
first
yeah.
that we think that as you get into situations where there are lots of monsters on screen and high-end areas where the amount of damage that you're seeing going in and out is really high, so you're having to react really quickly. Situations where you're being hard CC'd, or like stun or freeze or something like that, can be much more impactful than they are when the intensity and the pace of combat is lower. And so we want to make changes to CC to make that experience more fun.
I mean, I've seen clips where people just get obliterated.
We want to do that. It's not in 1.1.1, but those are changes that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Part of
larger CC stuff that
Yeah.
we're discussing internally that we want to kind of pair with a few of the big changes we have planned in the future.
In fact, we're working on stuff like that for that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a question here regarding. It's my favorite question because I always get this. It's from Cookie Drops. So, are you guys planning on addressing the issues related to like the imperfectly balanced on Necromancer, the decrep aura on Necromancer, and those are addressed in 1.1.1.
Yeah, we fixed it.
Those are. We just didn't list all the bug fixes
Yeah.
and stuff
There's
like
a
that.
whole lot of. The idea is that when you invest in elemental resistances, you will notice a difference in the damage that you take. The idea is that when you
This here in the future.
I talked about it a little bit.
I can add 3 and so forth. So
Yep.
most definitely being addressed in that. We've actually just been getting a general decent amount of questions related to resistances and what the intent is going to be with resistances here in the future.
Yes.
There's a ton of questions, so lots of names. But
Sure, yeah.
I guess like what's the vision
Sure.
on resistances here in the future?
I talked about it a little bit. The vision is kind of, I think, what the standard vision of most games is, which is everything is impactful and meaningful and feels good, and you invest and get rewarded for those things at all times.
And it
But,
doesn't right
reality is a little bit harder than that, but that is kind of the North Star and what we're trying to do. The idea is that when you invest in elemental resistances, you will notice a difference in the damage that you take. We don't want just armor or damage reduction or any like king stat that is just way better than everything else. That's the only thing that you care about. It is tough to find a perfect balance there of how impactful some things should be versus others, and then can you negate certain kinds of combat when you max things out or only focus on only one thing. And
So what he's basically saying here is we want them to work because they don't work right now.
there's a lot of gray area there that we're talking about, but our goal is that, and when we go and really take a deep dive at it, is one, we don't want you to just stack armor and that's better than everything else. We don't want you to stack just like general damage resistance and that's just better than everything else. We want elemental resistances to be meaningful, but we also don't want to get to a place where you fight a fire boss and you stack all fire resistances and it actually can't hurt you. Right? There's always a push and pull in this one.
The inverse of that is actually also really dangerous, which is that you're wandering through the game. You don't always know the kinds of creatures or affix. Obviously, you don't know the kinds of affixes you're going to be dealing with. You've got 0% poison resistance, and you get
you just
basically
die.
one tick from a level 60 poison creature kills you.
Sure.
Right. It's like
It's a balancing
there's a balancing act. The team is as we move forward, everything that Adam just said is 100% accurate. We want to make sure that the choices between like armor for mitigation, for damage resistance based on passives, legendary powers, glyphs and paragon nodes, those things are impactful, and that resistance plays a really, really important role. The big difference here is that resistance is a thing that you are going to stack and earn separately, and that they are usually tied to affixes or inherent affixes on rings and jewelry. So it means that some players will be able to go and encounter situations where they are not going to have a predictable amount of resistance when they go into an encounter, which means that we just need to think about what that is going to feel like for that player and imagine a world where they are able to still complete the content, but it's much more effective to have the appropriate amount of resistance. We need to make that feel impactful. Yes. So there's going to be situations where we are going to ensure that if you are getting into a predictable fight against a creature that you know is dealing a certain kind of damage and you don't have resistance in mind when you go into that fight, you're going to be penalized for that. That's going to be a really, really difficult situation for you. But we are, trying to balance this against the general flow of Diablo 4 as it stands today, as opposed to trying to like remake it.
Are there any discussions? Are you guys aware? Like, what are you guys planning on doing in relation to mounts?
Yeah, there are a few changes here. So we want to make mounts feel better, sort of broadly speaking, and a couple of those things are making sure that the boost feels really good, especially with controller, where it's underperforming, and the boost actually, the boost mechanic on the mounts, it actually stacks. There's a bug right now with that on controller where it's not stacking properly. We're going to fix that. There's a few other, there's a key part of this is that the mount gets stuck on things, and that's
Barricade.
one of the things that, barricade, for example. We, in theory, the idea that you're riding through an area and some bandits or some skeletons have set up a barricade for you, and you have to sort of like dismount and fight all those skeletons. Like, that sounds like a fun idea. It doesn't exactly play out that way. You're just sort of annoyed, and you're like, well, can I like kind of ride around the top of the barricade? And then it's a fight about whether the collision actually touches. Anyway, we're going to fix that. So there are some good changes to mounts coming soon in the future.
To a memory leak that we ended up addressing, but then in 1.1.1, and I know that QA and so forth, our QA team has been working really closely with their graphics engineering team and testing out a fix that's going to be coming in there that should be helping out a lot of those players and making sure that VRAM stays stable throughout their gameplay. About overpower and the intent behind it.
The intent of overpower scales mechanics can be facing the random like
I know there's kill me engineering.
That stuff is really fun to add, but we felt that
more content for players to play through at the moment, more so than some of the cosmetic pieces and so forth. But it is something I know that players have been asking for.
Yeah, we want to add more stuff like that. That stuff is really fun to add, but we felt that right now what was really important is
fixing the game,
helping barbarians, and some of these other buffs to classes.
And I think there's, we'll do this one last question here before we end the stream, but one thing that people have been asking about is like all the changes that they're seeing today, is this like encapsulating everything that we're doing? We had a question in here regarding, like, for instance, someone enjoyed playing a frozen orb sorcerer in like Diablo 2, for instance, and wanting to have that same type of fantasy in Diablo 4. Do you guys plan on doing additional adjustments in the future regarding other builds or other, like creating variability across that?
Sure, no, absolutely. This patch, I talked a little bit about like we have our short-term goals and long-term things we're thinking about. Forevermore.
Can we just fix the game first? Anyway, yeah, that was fun. Barbarian Sorcerer, big W. The fact that they're increasing and buffing certain aspects and skills and whatever with every class, that's a big W. They spoke on resistances and they want them to work, which is good. Crowd control shouldn't... They understand that crowd control shouldn't just one-shot you out of nowhere. That's good. I'm excited. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Comment, like, subscribe for more content. Peace out, guys.